3 days have passed, and the reality of the situation still feels like a dream. Eris sits in the dim light, his mind racing with disbelief at the incredible phenomenon that has pulled him directly into the pages of the novel he authored. He looks out over the majestic, sun-drenched estate of a prestigious magic family, acknowledging the trope he once used as a mere plot device possession. It was a concept relegated to the top ranks of webtoon series, something he never thought he'd experience firsthand. As he sits up in the quiet luxury of his new room, the gravity of his transformation becomes undeniable. He is truly inhabiting this new world. Stepping out of bed, he feels the weight of his new existence. Looking down, Eris touches his midsection, realizing with a hint of irony that he is still in this body, complete with the soft belly fat that sticks out. A mundane detail in an otherwise extraordinary rebirth. Larson stares into his own reflection, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and resignation as a glowing blue interface hovers before him. He thinks to himself that he simply cannot get used to this bizarre sight. No matter how hard he rubs his eyes, the floating words refuse to vanish, anchoring him to a reality he never asked for. The system window displays his new identity name, Larson Mayton, talent, magic combat technique, and a temperament described as highly unpredictable. It is the undeniable proof that he has possessed a character within the world of a novel. However, the weight of this realization is heavy, for he isn't just any character. He has become a star cross-supporting role, a doomed figure destined for a gruesome end. A vision of a cold, gray town square filled with a murmuring crowd flashes through his mind. In that dark timeline, he is to be executed by his very own brothers. He sees himself trapped in the stocks of a towering guillotine, the sharpened blade reflecting a lethal glint just moments before it falls. The scene shifts abruptly as 9 years pass. On the dawn of the first day, the young Larson lies fast asleep until his eyes suddenly snap wide open with a sharp startle. A jolt of pure adrenaline courses through him as he bolts upright in his lavish bed. He shouts out in a panic, frantic about his work and the time. His sudden, explosive movements catch his red-haired maid off guard, sending her recoiling in shock as she tries to attend to her master. Larson Mayton blinks as he is met with a flurry of frantic apologies. He stares blankly as a voice cries out, begging for forgiveness. Below his bed, a young maid named Alara is huddled on the floor, her body trembling violently as she prostrates herself in a deep kowtow. She wails that she has committed a crime worthy of death, her voice cracking with terror as she repeats her apologies over and over. Larson sits up in the middle of a lavish, sun-drenched bedroom, his eyes fixed on the trembling woman. He wonders to himself who she could possibly be. As he examines Alara's face, noted for its dusting of freckles and striking orange hair, he realizes she doesn't look Korean, nor does she look like a Westerner. Her features are an enigma to him. Hesitantly, Larson speaks up, his voice catching as he asks where he is. His simple question triggers a fresh wave of panic. Alara screams that she is sorry, explaining through sobs that she didn't know he was supposed to be awake, and had simply let him sleep. With a series of violent thuds, she slams her forehead against the floor in a desperate display of subservience, begging him to spare her life. Larson's eyes widen in absolute shock, his mind reeling as the sounds of her head hitting the wood echo through the room. Terrified for her well-being, he bolts upright and rushes toward her, stammering to ask if she is okay. Alara looks up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and lingering dread. A piercing scream rips through the quiet halls of the grand estate as a maid pleads for mercy, begging for him not to hit her. She collapses to the floor, her eyes rolling back in terror as she loses consciousness entirely. Looking down at the fainted girl in a chibi-like state of bewilderment. The young boy wonders how his simple act of standing up could have sent her into such a dead faint. Reflecting on the chaos, he admits that the first day was a total blur, leaving him completely out of sorts as he adjusted to his new reality. By the second day, the boy sits on the edge of his bed, a glowing blue system window flickering to life before him. It displays his profile, confirming he is no longer Cha Sungmin, but Larson Mayton, a youth endowed with magic combat techniques and a reputation for being highly unpredictable. Later that morning, he meets a young boy named Hampton. Entering the room with a deep, respectful bow and a heavy tome clutched to his chest, Hampton nervously announces that he is there to record the young master's daily log. When Larson repeats the term daily log, with a look of pure confusion, Hampton spirals into a panic. The boy stammers out a frantic apology, promising to finish the task quickly and get out of his way, clearly terrified of the unpredictable master before him. Eris stands in silent contemplation, his profile etched with a seriousness beyond his years. In the quiet study, a young scribe named Callan works diligently, his pen hovering over a thick tome. This is the daily log, a record Eris vaguely recalls from his past. It is a harsh reality for the successors of reputable families that every movement they make is closely monitored. Whether they are walking through the grand estate or training in the courtyard, their lives are subject to constant observation. Starting from the age of 14, another person is assigned the specific task of recording everything they do, turning a private life into a public record. Kalen continues his task, focused and unaware of the boy standing right behind him. When he finally senses Eris's presence, the shock is visceral. Kalen lets out a cry of surprise, recoiling so violently that he knocks his inkwell over. The dark liquid spills across the room, staining the floor and the book alike. Desperately, Kalen drops to his knees, stammering apologies as he frantically tries to clean the mess before it can set. Eris remains composed, his brow furrowed as he watches the frantic recorder, wondering silently what could have prompted such an exaggerated reaction. Larson's body reacts with a mind of its own, moving instinctively before he can even process the thought. As his gaze falls upon the tanned boy standing across from him, an undeniable impulse surges through his veins. He must kick him. This sudden, violent urge feels as though it were carved into the very essence of his being. As the second day draws to a close, the heavy fog clouding his mind begins to dissipate, and fragmented memories of Larson Mayton's past start to resurface. He trembles, gripped by the weight of a history that isn't entirely his own. He recalls a cruel childhood where, at just 4 years old, the young Larson would use a toy stick to mercilessly beat the servants assigned to him. Among those victims was Hampton, the same boy who now faces his inexplicable aggression. The memories deepen, revealing a pivotal moment at the age of 5 when Larson discovered the secret of his birth. In a fit of arrogant rage, he looked upon a maidservant with disdain, shouting in disbelief that someone of her low standing could possibly be his mother. The harsh truth of his lineage was laid bare. Larson Mayton was the illegitimate child of the powerful patriarch, Decatra, born from an affair with a simple maidservant. While Larson Mayton lived in the suffocating shadow of Decatra, his fear did not extend to everyone. In fact, he wasn't afraid of Soso at all. A young, bratty Larson stands defiantly before her, spitting on the ground with a look of pure contempt as he barks a command for her to get lost right now. This memory burns in his mind like a hot iron. He clutches his forehead in the present, overwhelmed by a wave of intense shame. This was his life at the age of 7, a time when he possessed a singular, dark talent for being an utterly horrible person. He was a whirlwind of malice, engaging in a relentless rampage of cruelty. He did a lot of things, countless terrible things that scarred those around him. He would strike a maid, sending her tea tray flying with a sharp thump, or chase an elderly servant through the halls with a branch. He even delivered savage kicks to the heads of those meant to serve him. This reign of terror lasted until he was 8 years old, culminating in a final, terrible incident that changed everything. The silence of the memory is shattered by a brutal impact as he strikes Eris, the force of the blow leaving a spray of crimson in its wake. Young Larson Mayton looms over a defenseless girl, brandishing a wooden club with a sadistic grin. He screams with unbridled malice, calling her a stupid-looking bitch and threatening to beat her until her death. The girl, Rosalind, lies pinned beneath his weight, her pink hair splayed against the ground as she cowers from the impending blow. This is the peak of Larson's immaturity. He goes so far as to brag to everyone about how he brutalized the 6-year-old daughter of a reputable martial arts family. The sounds of impact echo in the air as blood spatters, marking his senseless violence. Because of his actions, the fallout is a heavy blow to his family's honor. In a grand hall, his father, Decatra, is forced to humble himself, bowing deeply in a shameful apology before the imposing figure of the Grandel family's patriarch. The weight of the scandal is too much to bear, and before Larson even turns 9 years old, he is banished to a remote estate known as the Autumn Mansion. Even years later, his volatile temperament remains unchanged. Just a few days ago, he stood amidst wreckage, gripping a club with trembling fury as he demanded the chocolates that Burden bought. Watching the scene unfold on a computer screen, the creator of this world, Cha Sung-min, pauses to reflect on his work. As his fingers dance across the keyboard, typing out the history of the reputable swordsman family Sade, he questions if he made his character someone who is just crazy over chocolates. This is Larson Mayton, a villainous creation from the novel Cha Sung-min wrote, now brought to life through the glow of a monitor. Cha Sung-min initially designed Larson to be a simple scoundrel, a two-dimensional villain to move the plot forward. However, the author never bothered to fill in the intricate details or construct the vast tapestry of past memories that now flood the protagonist's mind. Looking out over a sprawling, sun-drenched city filled with bustling streets and towering spires, it becomes clear that this isn't merely the world written by Cha Sung-min. It is a world that exists beyond his pen, a reality where events unfolded independently, governed by their own internal logic. Peering out from a high window, Larson contemplates the weight of his new existence. He recalls the majority of his past now, though he bitterly dismisses them as nothing more than trashy memories of a life ill-spent. By the third day, the initial shock begins to fade into a cold realization. Sitting on the edge of a lavish bed in a room filled with morning light, he finally acknowledges the truth: he has possessed this body. This isn't a dream or some fleeting hallucination. It is his new reality. He can no longer afford to remain paralyzed by flabbergasted disbelief. In the world he left behind, Cha Sung-min types away at his keyboard, unaware of the life his creation has taken on. In the original novel, Larson Mayton was nothing but a scoundrel supporting character from the reputable swordsman family Sade. The author never specified the fine details of his appearance or the full extent of his hidden abilities, leaving those spaces blank in the manuscript. Now, those blanks have been filled by a living, breathing soul standing at the center of a story that is no longer being written, but lived. Larson Mayton exists only as a flickering shadow in the margins of the story, a mere supporting character who makes fleeting appearances. Because his arrival in the plot was never set in stone, he was gifted with a latent talent for martial arts, a fail-safe written into his existence just in case the narrative ever required it. Yet, as the story unfolded, that potential remained untapped and discarded, leaving him a ghost in his own lineage. To the readers of the webtoon reputable swordsman family Sade, he is a non-entity, a name they barely recognize. They wonder who he even is, questioning if the Mayton family ever truly had such a member. From their perspective, his supposed talent never existed at all. His life follows a tragic, predetermined arc, a brief spark that is snuffed out at the guillotine, meeting a gruesome end at the tender age of 17. The weight of this dark fate sends a literal chill down young Larson's spine as he sits on the edge of his bed, the reality of his situation sinking in. He realizes that surviving must become his absolute priority above all else. At 9 years old, he stares out with newfound intensity, calculating the narrow window he has left. There are still 8 years remaining before the date of his scheduled assassination. He has 8 years to dream of a future and somehow rewrite the conclusion of his life. But as the clock ticks, a wave of sheer panic washes over him. The true problem isn't the time he has. It's the terrifying uncertainty of what comes after the blade is supposed to fall. Even if he works hard to change his future for 8 long years, the protagonist remains haunted by the shadow of the true protagonist of this story, Kassan Sade. Kassan stands tall in polished silver and gold armor, his dark hair catching the light as he gazes toward a shimmering, celestial horizon with a cold and focused intensity. The fate of the Mayton family is inextricably tied to a confrontation with him. This blood feud traces back to a tragedy long ago when the Mayton family's patriarch, Decatur, unintentionally killed the first son of the swordsman family Sade. In a frozen, rocky wasteland, Decatur is seen unleashing a burst of blinding magical energy, a moment of accidental violence that would change history forever. The situation was buried in layers of complexity and kept secret, but as the narrative unfolds, the truth begins to surface, pushing the conflict between the two families toward an inevitable climax. The tension finally snaps, plunging both houses into a sudden, total war known as the Sword Demon War. An inferno consumes a grand estate, the sky turning a hellish orange as the silhouette of the building stands against the flames. True to the novel's title, reputable swordsman family Sade, the Sade family emerged victorious from the carnage. Their banner flies high over a battlefield littered with the fallen, while the Mayton family was left utterly destroyed. Faced with this grim cycle of destruction, the protagonist is left to wonder what he must do and exactly when he should begin his struggle to defy this preordained end. Eris stands in the center of a lavish chamber, his golden orange hair catching the soft light as he blinks in confusion at the ethereal words hovering before him. He observes how these strange messages appear and vanish at a whim, leaving him to wonder what his next move should be and when he should seize the initiative. In a flash of memory, the reality of this world's origin comes into focus. Cha Sung-min is the creator of this world, a man who built this universe as a side project during his tedious corporate career. Cha Sung-min, seen in his past life yawning at a cluttered desk, is the architect behind everything. Eris realizes with a start that he is that very creator. Standing before the phantom image of his former self, Eris acknowledges the truth. Every stroke of luck and every grand opportunity that the story's protagonist, Kassan Sade, encountered was hand-crafted by him. He holds his palm open toward the light, contemplating the immense power of knowing the future. He clenches his fist tightly, the fabric of his elegant sleeve rippling with the force of his resolve. At first, he thinks that if he makes use of his knowledge and pushes forward, he could return to his old life, but he quickly dismisses the idea with a firm no. A new ambition takes root as he realizes he can live a far better life here than he ever did before. Looking around at the shimmering marble and vast space of his current quarters, he notes that as compared to the small studio room he once lived in, even the toilet of this room is way bigger than that. Standing amidst the opulence of his new family's estate, Eris decides that since he only gets to live this life once, it wouldn't be a bad idea to enjoy all the luxuries that this huge wealthy family has. The boy thrusts his arm forward with a sharp, disciplined snap, testing the limits of a physical form he does not yet fully recognize. He contemplates the hidden power within him, musing that his martial arts are unrefined by his own hand, creating a strength that even Larson cannot yet fathom. He acknowledges that while this body possesses nothing but martial arts, it belongs to a natural-born genius. As he stares intensely at his palm, wondering how to properly harness this latent energy, he realizes the weight of his lineage. He carries the blood of the Maton family, one of the 3 great houses that command this world. A grand, Gothic estate towers over the landscape, a stone testament to the immense wealth and influence of his new family. Standing alone in an opulent hall, the boy reflects on his fortune, realizing he has been born with the ultimate golden spoon. He resolves to maintain an optimistic outlook, despite the grim reality of his situation. He is currently inhabiting the body of a despicable scoundrel who is destined to lose his head at the age of 17. Compared to his grueling past life in Korea as Cha Sungmin, this new existence is a paradise, provided he can survive. With 8 years of time on his side, he determines to rewrite his tragic ending. Suddenly, his eyes widen in shock as a brilliant blue light erupts within the room, bringing back the memory of the strange words he encountered the very moment he arrived in this world. A shimmering blue interface flickers into life, casting a cold glow as it displays a startling notification. It declares that the will of the character Larson Maton has been activated, followed immediately by the awakening of the legendary Heavenly Eye. Larson stands frozen, his amber eyes wide with shock as he softly whispers his confusion, wondering what is happening. He stares intently at the prompt, his mind immediately recognizing the terrifying significance of this power. This specific ability is supposed to be the exclusive heritage of the protagonist from the prestigious Sade swordsman family, yet the system confirms once more that the Heavenly Eye is now active within him. Standing alone in the center of his ornate chamber, Larson is overwhelmed by a singular, frantic thought. Why is an ability meant for a legendary hero manifesting in a person like him? A glowing blue notification window flickers into existence, declaring that the Heavenly Eye has been activated through Larson Maton's will. Standing alone by his window, the young Larson stares at the floating interface, recognizing it as a unique power that should belong only to the protagonist of this world, Kassan Sade. He realizes with a growing sense of unease that what he is witnessing are the direct effects of this divine skill. A deep frown creases his face as he ponders why such an ability would manifest for him. Since he knows all too well that he is not the hero of this story, he quickly brushes the concern aside, acknowledging that his very presence in this body has already made the future entirely unpredictable. He recalls the source of this reality, a Munchkin fantasy novel titled Reputable Swordsman Family Sade. In his mind's eye, the true protagonist, Kassan Sade, stands amidst a sea of monsters, a lone warrior of god-like proportions. Kassan is a force of nature, a swordsman whose strength is so immense it could theoretically shatter the entire planet, obliterating anything in his path with a single, earth-shaking strike. A cataclysmic shockwave ripples across the surface of the planet, threatening to tear the very fabric of existence apart. The terrifying truth is that his power knows no bounds. He is capable of destroying the universe itself. But the immediate tragedy lies closer to home, for he has already wielded that devastating might to annihilate the Maton family. Amidst the quiet aftermath of his awakening, Eris stands alone, his gaze drifting downward as a faint, ethereal blue light begins to manifest. Confusion crosses his features as a shimmering ring of energy begins to rotate around his torso. He questions the phenomenon, realizing this isn't something that should be visible to the naked eye. It feels invasive, as if an otherworldly heavenly eye is peering deep into his soul, analyzing his very anatomy. The realization hits him with a jolt, a single ring. He wonders if it is possible that he has already manifested the first circle. In this world, a circle refers to a ring of power created by gathering mana around the heart, serving as the essential fuel container for all magical endeavors. According to the lore written by Cha Sungmin, attaining such a feat requires grueling years of study and immense wealth. Looking back at memories of the original owner of this body, a cruel scoundrel who took pleasure in tormenting the weak, Eris knows there is no way such a person would have possessed the discipline for such advanced training. Even searching through his own borrowed memories, he finds no trace of the arduous practice required to reach this stage of magical mastery. Larson ponders the strange phenomenon of a window appearing automatically until a sudden rapping at his door interrupts his thoughts. He deduces that the late night visitor must be Hera. A polite request to enter comes from the hallway, and Larson calmly grants her permission. As the door creaks open, a surge of realization hits him, leaving him wide-eyed with shock. Hera enters and immediately drops to her knees in a display of submission. This sight triggers a memory of the original young scoundrel's cruel decree, where he demanded his subordinates kneel whenever he was in sight. Larson finds himself frustrated by the absurd rules established by his predecessor, but his confusion only deepens as he looks at the maid. Suddenly, a jagged notification of extreme alarm flashes in his mind as a character information screen materializes over Hera. Larson is stunned to see her primary talent listed as assassination while her other traits remain unanalyzable. He searches his memories, certain he never gave a simple maid such a lethal profession. Yet the evidence stares back at him from her inscrutable, pale green eyes. A heavy realization descends upon Cha Sungmin. He had momentarily forgotten the brutal truth of the world he now calls home. The realm of the novel, reputable swordsman family Sade, is a chaotic theater of power where violence is the only law, resembling an uncivilized wilderness more than a civilized society. As he stands surrounded by the looming silhouettes of his enemies, the pieces of the puzzle click into place. Someone has intentionally placed an assassin by his side, a lethal threat lurking in his inner circle. The fact that his enemies would send an assassin maidservant to his remote location confirms that he is a target in the bloody struggle for succession. Looking at his own reflection, his eye narrows as he acknowledges the fragility of his position. In this mad world, his status as a high-born heir with a golden spoon in his mouth offers no protection. Once dead, such privileges vanish. Forcing a jagged, unnatural smile to his lips, he commands himself to stay calm. He must keep up this performance, for the woman kneeling before him is a trained killer who will strike the moment she finds an opening. He watches Hera as she weeps and trembles on the floor, questioning if her tears and terror are merely a masterclass in deception. While it seems likely that her fear is an act, his heavenly eye reveals her status as an expert in assassination while suggesting her current distress might actually be real. He darkly notes that her acting skills are so profound she could easily find success on a stage, making her an even more dangerous adversary. Eris clears his throat awkwardly, his hand hovering near his face as he addresses the maid before him, calling her name with a slight hesitation. Hera, currently kneeling on the polished floor, looks up in a state of flustered surprise, her hand clutching her chest as she responds to her young master's call. With a cold and dismissive tone, Eris commands her to get up, his gaze shifting away as he instructs her to bring him the chocolates Burden had recently purchased. The request catches Hera off guard, her confusion evident as she repeats the word under her breath. Within his mind, Eris acknowledges the real reason for the errand. He needs her gone so he can finally organize his racing thoughts in solitude. When she doesn't move immediately, his expression hardens, and he sharply questions if she is now choosing to ignore his direct orders. Terrified by his sudden intensity, Hera scrambles to comply, promising to bring them at once as she rushes toward the door. The heavy wood clicks shut behind her, leaving her alone in the long, ornate hallway. As she walks away, she can't help but dwell on the strange interaction, wondering about the unusual expression he wore and the unsettling shift in his demeanor. It isn't just a momentary whim. She has noticed a change over the last few days, an evolution in the very atmosphere that surrounds the young boy. Looking back at the closed door where Eris stands in silent contemplation by the window, Hera feels a growing sense of uncertainty about the person her master is becoming. Larson Mayton gazes forward with a faint, knowing smile, his eyes filled with a weight that suggests there is definitely something different about him. As a maid makes her way down the polished corridor, her movements are quickened by a sense of unease. She acknowledges that while it is still too early to confirm anything, she should consider reporting his unusual behavior to her mysterious superior. Her silhouette fades into the distance of the long, arched hallway, leaving the quiet manor behind. Inside his private chambers, Larson sits at a desk, illuminated by the glow of a holographic terminal. He decides it is time to methodically go through all the information he has gathered. This is the harsh reality for Larsen Mayton. He has been banished to the secluded Autumn Mansion. His father has completely abandoned him, forcing him to the very bottom of the family's successor rankings. Despite the absolute certainty that there is no chance for him to become the successor of the Mayton family, he is still being closely monitored. He is a member of the Mage family destined to eventually rise against the Swordsman family, effectively cast as the villain in the eyes of the world. Larsen Mayton sits tensely at his desk, his eyes reflecting a desperate resolve as he watches a glowing blue status window label him as highly unpredictable. He knows that to ensure his survival, he must shed his past and begin behaving like a decent person. He reflects on Cha Sungmin, the creator of this world who holds the unique powers of a protagonist. Standing in the shadow of that greatness, Larsen recognizes his own advantage. He possesses knowledge of the future, every hidden opportunity, and the precise location of every ancient artifact. The weight of reality settles in as images of violent magical conflicts flash through his mind, and Larsen realizes he must participate in the impending succession war. If he doesn't, the Mayton family will mark him as nothing more than worthless trash. Though he is currently only 9, he feels the clock ticking. The true war begins the moment he turns 10. He gazes at a cold, gray tombstone, reminded of the fool who inhabited this body before him, a scoundrel who was sent to the afterworld at the mere age of 17 for his incompetence. Larsen envisions a different path, a life of indulgence where he can eat his fill and travel freely without a care. He dreams of a luxurious existence, tossing gold into the air and savoring the carefree life he never had in reality. To achieve this, he has a simple yet difficult plan. He must maintain a perfect middling position, ensuring he is neither underperforming enough to be discarded nor overstepping his boundaries enough to become a target. Cha Sungmin reflects on his past life, recalling the grueling and disciplined routine of a soldier in Korea, a life he has lived many times over. In the present, Larsen Mayton stares forward with newfound resolve, his violet eyes reflecting a cold clarity. He acknowledges that he now understands exactly how he must behave and what steps he needs to take to survive in this world. Suddenly, a blue holographic notice flickers before him, announcing that the Heavenly Eye has been deactivated due to a lack of mana. The silence of his room is broken by a sharp knocking at the heavy wooden door. A maid named Hyra stands at the entrance, her voice trembling as she offers her apologies. She explains with visible fear that she was unable to find the chocolates Burden purchased. Larsen dismisses her with a simple, "It's okay," causing her to freeze in shock. Internally, Larsen admits he never actually liked chocolates. The task was merely a distraction to buy himself some much-needed personal time. Confused by his uncharacteristic patience, Hera begins to stammer about the weight of her failure, but Larsen cuts her off. He commands her to get lost, maintaining the abrasive persona of the young master to hide his true intentions. He knows he must uphold Larsen's reputation as a scoundrel for now. As Hera hesitates, Larsen notes the terrifying silence of her footsteps, a trait that sets his nerves on edge. When she tries to bring up the chocolates once more, he loses his patience, shouting for her to leave already as the door latch clicks shut. Hera retreats in a daze, her mind racing as she wonders if she truly heard the scoundrel correctly. Her silent exit leaving Larsen alone with his thoughts. "No, I'm sure I heard it right," she thinks, her mind racing to reconcile the boy before her with the gluttonous brat she once knew. Ares stands calmly, his gaze level as he utters a simple, "It's okay." The words hang in the air, a jarring contrast to his usual behavior. Rosalind's internal monologue screams in disbelief. Someone who goes absolutely crazy at the mere sight of chocolate shouldn't be this composed. She watches him closely from the side, her sharp green eyes dissecting his every move. She decides that she will observe him for a while longer before deciding whether to report the strange change to the higher-ups. 1 week passes in the blink of an eye. Against the backdrop of the sprawling estate, Eris calls out for his servant Hampton. The boy arrives promptly, bowing as Eris issues a sudden command to get ready. Confused and visibly shaken, Hampton stammers, wondering what could possibly require preparation. Eris looks at him with a piercing, determined gaze and announces that he is going to the training building. The news leaves Hampton stunned, his mouth agape as he repeats the words in shock. Seeing the hesitation, Eris snaps, telling him to stop questioning and asking if he really needs to repeat himself. Panicked, Hampton immediately yields, promising to make an appointment for the 7th young master. As the wind rustles through the leaves, Eris reflects on the past week. He has sorted through his thoughts and reached a grim conclusion. To survive this cutthroat world, he must dive headfirst into the succession war and for the sake of his future, start behaving like a decent human being. Larson stands atop the castle ramparts, gazing out over the sprawling stone architecture as he contemplates his future. He acknowledges that he must train hard to ensure he can behave like a decent human being. His focus narrows as he clenches his fist with audible intensity, his resolve burning bright. Lastly, he vows to survive no matter the cost and achieve true independence. He understands that to reach this goal, there is one crucial thing he must secure first. His expression turns sharp and unwavering as he looks toward the horizon. The time has finally come for him to unleash that hidden power. Hampton sprints across the manor grounds, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he repeats his master's name, young Master Larson, like a mantra. A sudden realization strikes him, a stark epiphany that his master has changed. He vividly recalls the harsh discipline of the past, the memories of being beaten until he was a mess of blood and bruises flashing through his mind. Yet, he bears no ill will. Instead, he feels a profound sense of remorse, convinced that such treatment was merely the consequence of his own failure to serve properly. The boy continues his frantic pace, his thoughts racing as he acknowledges the impossible Larson has actually requested to visit the training building. Standing stiffly, Hampton's eyes are wide with shock as he whispers the name of their destination, unable to reconcile this new drive with the master he once knew. Unbeknownst to him, a blue holographic status window hovers in the air, detailing his secret profile as a poison-wielding assassin with the traits of a cowardly shadow. Watching from the side, Larson considers the revelation, thinking to himself how fortunate it is to have an aide with such a lethal specialty. He ponders when Hampton could have possibly learned the art of poison, his eyes narrowing as he suspects that the aide is secretly sharpening a sword of vengeance within his heart. He knows all too well that every successor in a reputable mage family is granted a well-trained aide, though their loyalty is often a mask for far deadlier intentions. The weight of the Maton family legacy is forged in the shadows, where children are trained and brainwashed from a tender age to become the ultimate instruments of loyalty. These individuals are conditioned to devote their entire lives to their assigned successor candidates, existing only as extensions of their master's will. Among them is Hampton, the dedicated shadow bound to the seventh young master. Larson Maton looks upon his silent companion with a mix of disbelief and self-deprecation, questioning if even a failure like himself is entitled to such a devoted guardian. Despite Larson's internal turmoil, there is no denying Hampton's pedigree. He is a product of the Maton family's rigorous and brutal training. As they approach the training building, Hampton's stoic exterior masks a surge of genuine gratitude. He can't believe his master is actually here to train, feeling a swell of hope. Yet, a flicker of concern remains as Hampton observes the sudden change in Larson's demeanor, wondering what could have caused such a shift. His loyalty isn't born of a fear of trouble, but from a deeper, more painful place. His heart aches whenever Larson is subjected to the biting scorns of the household staff, who have long despised the young master for his reckless and erratic behavior. Aris watches with a steady gaze, his mind focused on the companion beside him as he resolves that he should have trust in him. He remains calm, his silent support anchoring the moment. Kalen stops in his tracks, his back turned to the camera as he takes in the sight before them. A single word of genuine awe, wow, escapes his lips as he stares at the skyline. Towering over the traditional grounds is a massive, glass-fronted skyscraper that looks like it was plucked straight from a 21st century city. Kalen stares up at the modern marvel, realizing with a dry mental note that he really did a half-assed job with the setting of this world, having accidentally imported such an architectural anomaly. Despite the jarring contrast, Kalen feels a sense of relief, admitting that the modern design is comfortable because it is so familiar to him. Above the entrance, a holographic notice board glows with blue light, identifying the structure as Training Building 1. He moves toward the entrance, recalling the structure of the compound where an administrator resides within each of the training buildings to oversee the students' progress. With a smooth mechanical hiss, the glass doors slide open. A figure steps out from the brightly lit interior, his presence signaled by the rhythmic sound of his footsteps on the stone path. The man is tall and clad in sleek, dark robes with gold accents, his eyes obscured by a pair of sharp visor-like glasses. He crosses his arms confidently and offers a polite greeting, addressing Kalen as the seventh young master. Flashing a professional and bright smile, the man introduces himself as Noah, the administrator in charge of the Leaf Building. His movements are polished, exuding the air of a high-ranking official. Kalen offers a casual nod, replying that it is nice to meet him, Behind him, Eris remains observant as Noah lowers himself into a deep, subservient bow, expressing that it is a profound honor to meet the young master in person. However, the atmosphere shifts as Kalen's expression turns chillingly dark. Behind his polite mask, he seethes with rage, remembering that this very man slapped him a year ago for the crime of not bowing low enough. He stares down at the administrator, noting with cold amusement that the jerk doesn't even recognize the boy he once treated with such disdain. High above the sprawling floor of the training arena, the cold architecture mirrors the tension of the meeting below. Eris stares intently at the hooded figure before him, trying to activate his heavenly eye. But the technique fails to pierce the man's aura. He realizes with a start that this administrator is vastly more powerful than Larson Mayton, though he reasons that such strength is only natural for someone in his position. Deciding that humility is his best path forward, Eris softens his gaze and asks for a monster recommendation suitable for his training, hoping to find a challenge that matches his current growth. The administrator pauses, the word training echoing in his mind as if it were a foreign concept. When Eris repeats his request for a monster suitable for his age, the administrator asks for clarification. Eris simply replies that he is 9 years old. Deep within the administrator, a storm of resentment breaks. He hasn't forgotten the insult of being slapped by the boy, counting every second of the 396 days that have passed since then. A dark, calculated grin begins to pull at his lips as he searches for a way to sabotage Eris without violating any of the strict administrative rules. Suddenly, an idea flashes behind his sunglasses. He suggests that Eris face the mushroom monster, noting that the prestigious 6th young master achieved such a feat at the same age. Eris repeats the name with a hint of skepticism, recalling his own knowledge of the creature. It is a pathetic, bottom-tier monster, barely 50 centimeters tall and known only for hopping around harmlessly in the woods. Thinking this will be an easy start, Eris agrees to the terms. The administrator bows with a flourish of exaggerated respect, promising to prepare the mushroom forest field immediately. As the official skips away, humming a joyful tune and practically dancing toward the control terminal, Eris watches him with a growing sense of dread, wondering why the man seems so unnervingly excited about such a simple task. Larson stands calm, his mind calculating. He knows the mushroom monster isn't a formidable foe. Even the obscure 6th young master managed to slay one at just 9 years old. For someone with his lineage, this should be effortless. He gives himself a 3-minute window, steadying his focus as he feels the magical ring pulsating around his heart. His confidence stems from his mastery over magic combat techniques, a skill he developed independently. The blood of a renowned mage family flows through him, granting him a natural affinity for the arcane. The wizard scholar signals the start, granting permission for Larson to proceed. With a flash of blue light, the world shifts. A magical notification informs him of his new location, a mushroom forest manifested through high-level sorcery. Larson stands amidst towering, bioluminescent fungi, their soft glow illuminating the damp terrain. The scholar's voice echoes a final wish for success as the young mage steps deeper into the artificial woods. Suddenly, a rustle breaks the silence. Larson narrows his eyes, questioning if his target has finally appeared. From the shadows, a grotesque creature emerges with a deafening, high-pitched screech. It is the mushroom monster, a lumbering entity with a wide cap and a gaping, dark maw. Recalling his training, the advice rings clear in his mind. The monster's core weakness lies in its body. Being a fungus-type creature, it is exceptionally vulnerable to the searing heat of fire. Larson stares down the shrieking beast, skeptical that this bizarre creature is truly the threat he was warned about. Eris stares down a pair of squat, hopping mushroom monsters, feeling a wave of revulsion as he realizes how unsettling it is to see a fungus moving on its own. Steeling his nerves, he prepares for combat, asking himself if it is finally time to get started. His right hand begins to glow with a fierce, electric blue mana that crackles and pops with raw energy. As he steps into his stance, a translucent screen flickers into existence, notifying him that the will of his physical body has been confirmed, and the magic combat technique, imprinted within him, is now active. A hum of power resonates through the air as Eris's eyes catch the shimmering light of his awakening potential. Meanwhile, the wizard scholar watches the boy through a crystal ball, lost in a memory of his own past. He recalls a time before joining the Mayton family when he was hailed as a famous genius mage in the Dorothy territory. However, that prestige was short-lived. He remembers the stinging pain of a slap across his face as a superior berated him, questioning his very humanity simply because his formal bow was measured at a subpar 82-degree angle. A man's jaw tightens in fury, his teeth bared in a snarl of resentment as he recalls a perceived slight. He bellows that he was humiliated simply because he greeted someone with an 82-degree angle bow instead of a 90-degree one. The wizard scholar throws his head back in a manic, dark laughter, his glasses reflecting the glow of a crystal ball held between his claw-like hands. He vows to pay back that humiliation today, revealing that the mushroom monster his target is currently fighting has been secretly upgraded to the highest possible level. Inside the orb, a sudden movement cuts through the air with a sharp sound as Eris stands ready for the creature's lunges. The massive, dark limb of the monster swings with crushing force while the wizard scholar sneers internally, noting that the magic combat technique Eris possesses is considered lowly and insignificant within the prestigious mage family. Eris remains focused, his eyes tracking the monster's movements, despite the rainbow trails of magic surrounding him. The scholar's voice echoes the arrogant belief that there is no way for the boy to damage the mushroom monster with a combat technique that lacks any elemental attributes. Hidden in the shadows, the scholar watches the fray with a malicious grin, certain that this will finally be his revenge against the brat who looked down on him. Suddenly, the scholar's expression of triumph vanishes, replaced by a wide-eyed look of utter confusion and disbelief as he sees something impossible through his scrying orb. Defying all expectations, Eris leaps forward, his fist glowing with a concentrated, violet magical energy as he strikes the mushroom monster head-on. Eris ignites his fist with a crackle of raw magical energy, his gaze sharpening with intense focus as he prepares to strike. With a sudden, explosive motion, he lunges forward, his fist trailing a streak of light as it connects with a deafening impact. The wizard scholar watches in absolute disbelief, his mouth agape behind his visor, unable to comprehend the sheer force displayed before him. He screams out in shock, questioning how such destruction was possible with just a single blow. Eris lands gracefully in the misty clearing, his enemy dissipating into sparks as he casually remarks that the encounter was surprisingly easy. A chime rings out as a blue translucent screen flickers into existence, catching Eris off guard and causing his eyes to widen in surprise. A system notice informs him that his newly enlightened magic combat technique's rank is beginner and confirms that he has successfully used the enlightened magic combat technique. The notification further explains that the highly unpredictable part of things is starting to become just a little more predictable, and that the beginner magic combat technique has been fully imprinted. Eris feels a violent surge of blood through his heart, a physical manifestation of the newfound power pulsing within his veins. A final notification flashes, declaring that the beginner magic combat technique, weight utilization, has been imprinted on the mana circle. Eris stands amidst the mist, his body vibrating with a luminous blue aura, left in awe as he wonders about the true nature of this power. Administrator Vane stares in stunned silence, his eyes wide behind his glasses as he tries to fathom the spectacle he just witnessed. He wonders what on earth just happened, questioning if the boy truly used a pure magic combat technique. He knows that such techniques deal physical damage, which the mushroom monster should have been able to resist with its natural defenses. Yet, Eris hunted the creature with such ease that it borders on the ridiculous. Watching the young master, Vane's mind races as he tries to reconcile the boy's current power with the child he knew just a year ago. Coming back to the task at hand, Vane speaks through the comms, admitting that the current monster is no longer a suitable training target for someone of Eris's caliber. Eris simply agrees, his expression stoic as he looks off into the distance. Behind the scenes, Vane breaks into a cold sweat, frantically wiping his brow as Eris suggests increasing the difficulty even further. The administrator panics slightly, worried about his own mana reserves if things get too intense. When Eris requests the crimson mushroom monster, Vane warns him of its increased speed and its ability to propagate, if not killed quickly. Steeling himself, Vane decides to put his emotions aside, focusing solely on collecting data for his upcoming report. Standing amidst the swirling mists of the training grounds, Larson Mayton keeps a sharp eye on his surroundings. He resolves that if he thinks things are about to get dangerous, he will stop the training immediately. Administrator Vane's voice carries through the air, announcing the arrival of the crimson mushroom monster. Larson looks on, pondering the creature's origin. He realizes he didn't write about this entity in such detail, and concludes it is likely just another monster that stemmed from the original backstory. He gives a brief nod of acknowledgement, saying, "All right then," as Vane warns him that the monster will appear soon. A sudden rift opens, and the mushroom monster manifests in a burst of light. Larson stares at the creature, skeptically questioning what the difference between this one and the previous version could be, aside from its striking red color. His curiosity is instantly met with a brutal reality check as the monster accelerates into a blur. A sharp exclamation of shock escapes him as the creature strikes with a thunderous impact, tearing through the earth. Larson's eyes widen as he realizes the sheer scale of the threat. The monster continues its high-speed assault, its movements leaving trails of light as it slams into Larson with a bone-jarring force. Larson stands firm, his senses heightened as dust kicks up around his feet from the creature's relentless movement. In his mind, he notes that while the opponent possesses impressive strength and speed, it lacks the true aura of a threat. His violet eyes lock onto the mushroom monster, searching for a gap in its defense. As the creature lunges, Larson reacts with blinding speed, a burst of blue arcane energy shimmering as he parries the blow. From his observation point, Administrator Vane can hardly believe his eyes, shouting out in shock that the boy has successfully deflected the strike. Larson's expression remains composed. He has already deduced the core of the battle, noting that the monster attacks in a repetitive, simple pattern. Deciding to test his growth, he prepares to unleash an enlightened ability. With a firm strike, his palm connects with the enemy, triggering a surge of magical power. A floating interface confirms the activation of his beginner magic combat technique, weight utilization, as the tide of battle shifts firmly into his favor. Larson strains against the limits of his current vessel, his eyes widening in realization as a blue system window flashes before him with a warning of insufficient mana. He curses under his breath, realizing he has pushed himself too far. Just as the mushroom monster lunges, Larson experiences a moment of profound shock. In a fluid, high-speed motion, he swings his blade, the arc of the strike creating a powerful shockwave that sends the creature flying through the air. Standing amidst the settling dust, he reflects on the strange phenomenon where time seemed to slow down for a fleeting instant, a miracle that allowed him to successfully deflect the blow. A new system notification appears, informing him that his mana has been completely depleted for the first time, resulting in the deactivation of his heavenly eye. He decides to investigate this mysterious temporal shift once he has recovered his strength. Meanwhile, in a quiet observation room, Hampton watches the recording in stunned silence, steam rising from a fresh cup of tea. He wonders if the young master has been secretly honing his skills in private. Beside him, Administrator Vane adjusts his glasses, inquiring whether the 7th young master has yet undergone his 10th year ceremony. Hampton confirms that the vital ritual is scheduled for next year, leaving both men to contemplate the terrifying potential of the boy. Administrator Vane grits his teeth, his eyes wide behind his glasses as sweat beads on his brow. He is consumed by disbelief, wondering how it is possible for the boy to be so incredibly strong when he hasn't even undergone the expected trials yet. Rhythmic, heavy footsteps echo through the sterile hall as leather shoes click against the polished floor. Standing in a wide, sunlit training hall, Administrator Vane towers over young Hampton and the blonde young master, Eris. Hampton gazes at Eris in silent awe, his mind racing with the realization that his master has already achieved the first mana circle. Administrator Vane looks down at Eris, his expression a mask of skepticism. He remains unconvinced, certain that obtaining the first circle is an impossible feat without a lifetime of grueling effort. Tears well up in Hampton's large, expressive eyes as his bottom lip quivers with emotion. He is overwhelmed by a sense of pride, convincing himself that Eris must have been training in secret, far from any prying eyes, to reach such heights. Overcome with emotion, Hampton throws himself at Eris, wrapping him in a desperate hug and crying out for his master. Eris stands stoically, offering no response but a blank stare, while Administrator Vane watches the display with a stoic, unreadable presence. As Hampton clings to him, Eris's eyes narrow with calculating precision. He realizes that his display of power has caused far too much of a stir. Knowing he hasn't yet grasped the full nature of this new world, he decides that staying under the radar is his best course of action. With a sudden, dramatic slump, Eris collapses to the floor, his body going limp. Hampton and Administrator Vane watch in sheer terror as the young master falls. Administrator Vane's composure shatters as he shouts in panic for the young master. Next to him, Hampton's face is pale with shock, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Seizing control of the situation, Administrator Vane barks a command at Hampton, ordering him to sprint to the 2nd level and fetch a healing mage immediately. Without a moment's hesitation, Hampton turns and bolts down the hallway, shouting his compliance. Lying on the cold floor with his eyes closed, Eris mentally rehearses his next move. He wonders what kind of story he should fabricate to explain his sudden collapse, comforted by the knowledge that professional help is already on the way from the level above. In the sterile silence of the infirmary office, Administrator Vane sits behind a massive desk, unaware of the chaos about to burst through the door. Suddenly, a frantic young man rushes into the room, his voice booming as he desperately asks if there is a healing mage present. Startled by the sudden intrusion, Vane nearly falls from his chair, his heart racing as he stammers out a request to know what is wrong. Hampton, the servant, announces with a heavy voice that the 7th young master has been severely injured. Vane stands up with a jolt, his expression shifting from surprise to concern as he acknowledges the gravity of the news and urges for quick action. Confusion clouds Vane's face as he asks for clarification, wondering if it was the 6th young master, only for Hampton to firmly insist it is the 7th. Vane points out that Hampton doesn't seem like the 6th master's servant, leading Hampton to declare his name and his unwavering service to the 7th young master. Vane looks on in disbelief, his internal thoughts questioning why a scoundrel like the 7th young master would even be present in such a situation. Hampton explains that the young master took down a mushroom monster, but sustained a critical hit during the life, or death struggle. Shocked by the news, Vane asks how he could possibly accomplish such a feat, and Hampton attributes the victory to the use of a magic combat technique. Larson Mayton lies motionless on a bed, his face pale and his expression peaceful despite the severe toll the battle has taken on his body. Vane stares at the boy, realizing that internal injuries caused as a side effect of magic combat techniques are nearly impossible to heal through standard means. The administrator stands by the bedside with Hampton, looking down at the fallen noble while weighing the political and medical risks. Vane concludes that he will put on a show of providing treatment to save face, before ultimately sending the difficult case to a high-ranking mage. The wizard scholar looks down at the patient, his mind already racing with excuses. He reasons that if the boy goes to the main building, he can shirk this heavy responsibility onto the more skillful mages stationed there. With a sudden surge of energy, a brilliant aura of light erupts around the gurney. Spectral cherubs appear, heralding the activation of a divine spell as the scholar extends his hand toward the unconscious heiress. The words Mana Embrace manifest in a bold text box, signaling the height of the magical attempt as energy swirls through the chamber. The golden-haired heiress remains perfectly still, his eyes closed in a deep slumber. A soft, magical wind ruffles his hair, but there is no sign of life returning to his pale features. The wizard scholar observes the lack of progress with a cold, analytical gaze, noting to himself that as expected, there was absolutely no reaction to his efforts. Sweat beads on the scholar's brow as the weight of the silence grows heavy, his gaze intense as he searches for any flicker of life. With a nervous twitch, he swallows hard, the sound of his gulp punctuating the tense atmosphere of the room. Resigning himself to failure, the scholar thinks that the magic was never going to work in the first place, deciding to end the session now and send the boy to the main building. He reaches out, his mind set on just half, asking the rest of the procedure to get it over with, though his hand trembles visibly with fatigue and frustration. Suddenly, with a sharp flash of purple light, Aris's eye snaps wide open. The sudden return of consciousness is as jarring as a thunderclap in the quiet room. The wizard scholar recoils in shock, his voice cracking as he cries out for the young master, while Ares abruptly sits upright. Behind them, Cassin Sade and young Hampton watch in stunned silence as the boy returns to the world of the living. Disbelief washes over the scholar as he stares at Ares, wondering for a fleeting moment if his own magic abilities have somehow improved overnight. He quickly dismisses the idea, concluding that he didn't actually heal the boy. It makes far more sense that Ares simply recovered by himself. Ares gazes forward with an icy, determined look, his expression unreadable as a single, muffled syllable escapes his lips. The room falls into a confused silence as the scholar Cassin and Hampton lean in, their faces mask of bewilderment as they offer a puzzled pardon in response to Aris's faint words. Inside the stark, quiet confines of the infirmary, Larson Mayton sits upright on his hospital bed, his small frame dwarfed by the heavy, set men surrounding him. With a nonchalant but firm tone, he repeats himself, his words cutting through the tense atmosphere as he simply states, "I thanks." The effect is instantaneous and seismic. In a moment of pure, unadulterated shock, the three men, Administrator Vane, the burly elder monk at his side, and the young disciple Soso, recoil with expressions of utter bewilderment. Their eyes bulge and their jaws drop as a thunderous collective cry of the Duduchit erupts from them. The sheer impossibility of the young master's gratitude leaving them completely paralyzed with disbelief. Serafina gasps for air, her chest heaving with exhaustion as she presents a dark bar of burdened chocolates. Her voice is strained as she informs Master Kale that she has secured the treats, her face flushed and sweat beaded from the effort. With a deep sense of regret, she explains that only 2 chocolates remain, apologizing profusely because she knows he had requested 3. Despite her fatigue, she promises to find a way to get another one for him. From his bed, Master Kale responds with an uncharacteristic calm, telling her it is fine and instructing her to simply leave the chocolates before exiting. Serafina's eyes widen in utter shock at his sudden leniency. Kale urges her to go and rest, noting that she looks unwell and admitting that he no longer wishes to torment the assassin. He adds that he is drained from his own training session and demands that he not be disturbed. Bowing her head in respect, Serafina stammers her compliance, wishing the young master a restful sleep. One worker questions if it is truly possible that the young master went to train, and a maid confirms the news, having seen him head to the training building herself. The staff is left in a state of absolute denial at the boy's change of heart. Meanwhile, the rich chocolate is finally tasted, the sound of a sharp crunch echoing through the air. Master Kale lies back on his bed, reflecting on the taste of the treat. He admits to himself that while he usually doesn't care for chocolates, this particular variety is quite different. As he savors the bite, the chocolate immediately melts in his mouth, and the warmth of the sweetness envelopes his entire body like a soft, comforting blanket. However, a sudden suspicion crosses his mind, and he pauses, wondering if what he's experiencing is more than just a fleeting physical sensation. Activating his specialized vision, the heavenly eye, he observes with clinical precision. He realizes that the essence of the chocolate is truly spreading throughout his physical form. A translucent blue system notification materializes before him, confirming that he has obtained a small amount of mana. He stares at his own hands, which are now coursing with visible blue energy, and thinks back to the original owner of this body, calling him a crazy scoundrel while questioning if this bizarre method was how the boy had accumulated such high levels of mana. Another prompt flickers into existence, notifying him that he has discovered a fragment of unpredictability. He feels as though his character is gaining significant depth, as if the messy predictability of this world is finally being reorganized into something more coherent. Sitting up in disbelief, he considers the absurdity that one could gain magical power simply by eating chocolates. He muses on the traditional path of a sorcerer, where mages must seek out dangerous locations overflowing with mana, and endure immense suffering just to absorb even a fraction of that energy. Looking back at his own hands, he realizes that the original version of this character must possess a unique constitution he never detailed in his writing. This oversight explains why the boy was always roughly described as being highly unpredictable. Master Kale sits on his bed, pondering the incredible convenience of free mana, though he muses that the only downside might be gaining weight from his chocolate-fueled progression. He springs up, driven by the memory of a sensation he felt before, knowing he must analyze it further to truly master his power. As he executes a sharp, fluid strike through the air, a luminous blue system notice materializes with a sharp flash. It declares that his talent, flow slowly, has been enlightened. Kyle pauses, confused by the cryptic name of the skill and what it could possibly mean. A sudden knocking at the door disrupts his thoughts. Assuming it is the maid, he calls out to Hiria, reminding her that he already said he didn't need anything today. When a voice from the hallway announces he has a guest, Kyle doesn't hesitate to tell them to get lost. The door swings open with an intimidating thud as a figure asks how he can be so rude to his own older brother. Standing tall in the doorway is Carlton Mayton, the 6th young master of the family. He stares down at Kale with a sneer, demanding to know why he hasn't stood up to greet him and questioning if he has no brain. He goes even further, cruelly asking if Kale wants to be forced to eat pigeon droppings again. A cold sweat breaks out on Kale's face as the deep-seated terror the original Larson felt for Carlton resurfaces. Trembling, he bows deeply and offers a submissive greeting to his brother. Carlton remains unimpressed, looking down his nose and remarking that this pathetic state is exactly why he is a mess, a slow-witted idiot in every possible regard. Carlton Mayton looks down with a condescending sneer, demanding to know what his younger brother is doing. Master Kale, momentarily caught off guard, can only manage a confused response as he asks for a pardon. Carlton's temper flares instantly as he raises his staff high, barking that Kale should be crawling like a bug and demanding he kneel right this moment. Kale's eyes widen in sheer shock as the threat of violence hangs over him. Suddenly, a brilliant blue system notice flashes into existence, announcing that the talent flow slowly, being engraved into his body, has been automatically activated. Within the slowed perception of time, Kale recognizes this sensation as the exact same feeling he experienced during his battle with the Crimson Mushroom monster. He decides firmly that he has no intention of being beaten by a mere extra like the sixth young master. With a calculated gaze, he realizes that now that he understands the nature of this power, this is the perfect opportunity to test its true strength. He focuses his resolve, deciding that the first step is to act. In a sudden display of refined technique, Kale intercepts the descending blow with a sharp clank of metal. Stunned by the unexpected resistance, Carlton's arrogance falters as he asks Kyle what he just did. His shock quickly curdles into a frantic rage, screaming to know what a piece of vermin like Kale could have possibly done. Kale remains remarkably composed, meeting his brother's frantic gaze with a steady look as he coolly explains that he was simply exercising his right to self-defense.